Since the Taliban regained power in Afghanistan after 20 years, concerns have been raised over meeting the Afghan people's basic needs, such as food security. According to a recent report issued by the United Nations World Food Programme, an estimated 98% of Afghans are more or less hungry. What is being done to help address these very basic needs? What role is China playing? I'm pleased to be joined from Geneva, Switzerland by Robert Mardini, Director General of the International Committee of the Red Cross. Mr. Mardini, thank you very much for joining us once again. I understand you just visited that country end of February, so please share with us your observations as to what life is like there for the civilians at this moment, and especially the food situation that I mentioned.
Thank you for having me. I was in Afghanistan end of February, and during my visit, I was really deeply affected by the magnitude of the crisis that Afghans people are facing day in and day out. And let's not forget that Afghans have experienced 4 decades of armed conflict, repeated cycles of drought, putting their food security at risk. And I think it's fair to say that no family has been spared by the effect of war. And while the day-to-day security has improved over the past months, Afghans face acute needs in humanitarian, but also in socio-economic terms. And this is not the time for the international community to forget Afghanistan. The well-being of the Afghan people should really lie above politics, and the ICRC is really committed and will consistently call for proper international attention and funding to ensure that public services that are critical to the survival of the civilian population be preserved in the country and the economic collapse is avoided.
So is 98% of the population hungry? Is that really the accurate estimation of the situation? That sounds pretty bad.
It is very severe. It's very difficult to have exact figures, but we see more and more people in the streets selling their few belongings to be able to put food on the table. We see more and more people seeking daily jobs. The situation is very dire. The economic system is at the brink of collapse. The vast majority of banks are not working. It's very hard for people to get funds. The vast majority of civil servants today in Afghanistan are simply not getting their salary. So you can imagine the ripple effect when a family relies on 8 members of a family rely on a salary, how hard daily life is for Afghans today.
I know it is very difficult for people like you to make any political comments, but from your observation, is it because of the incompetence or lack of will, or the difficult international environment, or natural disaster? What is it that makes the situation so bad?
Well, I think it's really a combination of factors, and the Afghanistan is in the eye of the cyclone of a perfect storm. So this is the consequence of 4 decades of armed conflict that really brought the country in a very dire state. And then the effect of climate change are also at the same time and concurrently hitting Afghanistan with the cycles of drought and floods that are more intense, more frequent. And of course, this is putting huge pressure on the food production in the country and the ability of us Afghans to sustain their own needs. And the fact today that the international community and the vast majority of development agencies unplugged their support to Afghanistan since August
last year.
A country that relies heavily on international aid, of course, is bringing many of the critical services that 40 million Afghans rely on at the brink of collapse. ICRC has stepped in to avert the collapse of the hospital system. We are today supporting 33 hospitals across the country. So this amounts to 85% of the total bed capacity, hospital bed capacity of the country. It covers the health needs of 20 million Afghans. And what we are doing is simply to pay salaries in those hospitals, to provide hospitals with food supplies so that nurses and doctors are able to eat. It's providing medical supplies. It's providing fuel for generators. So you can see how dire the situation is. We are paying salaries for 10,000 health professionals, but this is only 2% of the total number of civil servants in Afghanistan.
How much support, how much willingness are you observing, are you experiencing in providing these kind of assistance with the local authorities? Do you see that there's a genuine effort to improve governance, but they are unable to do more?
Well, if I take the example of our hospital resilience program that I just mentioned earlier, actually we are providing this support in full cooperation with the Afghan institutions. We are working with the professionals in the Ministry of Public Health, and it would be a mistake to bypass existing Afghan institutions that have been supported by the international community over the past 2 decades. And I think it's important to ensure that all the support and help is provided in the existing system to ensure that all this is sustainable. Having said that, humanitarian aid alone cannot replace a functioning public sector, nor can they fully meet the needs of the Afghan population. And this is really the only way to develop and enable essential services like healthcare, water, and education. The banking and liquidity crisis is really having a devastating effect on the overall economy. The lack of cash affects all levels of society, especially communities which are already very vulnerable. And as I said earlier, most banks today in Afghanistan remain closed. People can't withdraw their savings. Salaries can't be paid directly to bank accounts. And financial intermediaries continue to be absolutely critical to get money into the country. And this has a direct impact on the availability of basic essential services, such as the provision of healthcare, education, and water and sanitation.
How about the question about girls and women, their opportunity, their roles, whether girls have been able to been allowed to go back to school? We know that Taliban's acting foreign minister said that 60% of schools in Afghanistan have already reopened, and that they will never forbid girls from entering school. But there have been reports that the decision was reversed and that it was, getting worse. So what's the reality you saw there?
Well, when I was there in February, the reality I saw in all the hospitals we support, in the physical rehabilitation and orthopedic centers we support, women and men are working together to deliver essential services. During my meeting with Afghan officials, I was reassured that education is open to everyone, including girls. There has been new decisions made. These are early days. We need to see how this translates in concrete terms. We really hope that education will indeed be offered to everyone, girls and boys across the country.
Of course.
And we will be following this very closely.
Of course, but how come there was this confusion? I mean, some reports were talking about girls not being able to go back to school. Others say it's a delay because of other reasons. Could you help clarify? Are you able to do that?
It's very hard because these are early days. There are still different realities across the country. There are places, according to my colleagues, where girls are able to go to schools, other where they stop going to school. So it's really early stages, and we need to have a clearer picture, and we hope that education will indeed be accessible to everyone.
Sure. Right now the world is focused on the situation in Ukraine for obvious reasons. There are more than 4 million people who have left the country as refugees, but do you think there is a danger that the world is forgetting what is happening in Afghanistan, that Afghan humanitarian crisis is not getting enough attention and support?
Well, I hope not. This is a risk indeed. The ICRC launched a budget extension appeal of 53 million Swiss francs just today in order to ensure the continuity of our health programs in the country. We hope that the international community will step up to its obligation to support the Afghan people and the solidarity, and that the situation in Ukraine, that of course also deserves all the attention of the international community, should not deflect attention, solidarity and generosity towards the Afghan people.
What is your expectation of what may come out of the meeting here that's taking place in China of foreign ministers of countries neighboring Afghanistan? Do you pin some hope, at least, that some kind of progress can be made so that the humanitarian situation can be alleviated a little bit at least?
Well, it is first really important to acknowledge and recognize the role of Afghanistan's neighbors in this very critical phase, and note also the significance of China's support to the Afghan people. The ICRC had an effective engagement with China on Afghanistan since last year in Kabul, in Beijing, and in Geneva. And these discussions provided really valuable opportunities for the ICRC to present its humanitarian priorities and positions on Afghanistan. So these exchanges also deepened our understanding of China's approach to support Afghanistan. And we are really grateful for the support and partnership with the Red Cross Society of China. I think it's important to mention this here, both in terms of assistance to hospitals and the Afghan Red Crescent Society working everywhere in Afghanistan. But of course, we hope that this important meeting in Beijing will
in China
translate in China will translate in very concrete actions for the Afghan people.
Yes. One detail which is very interesting is a meeting of China, US, Russia consultation mechanism on the Afghan issue. How do you look at that?
Well, I think any dialogue that aims to support the 40 million Afghan people who are today in a very difficult situation is something that the ICRC welcomes, and we really hope that any political dialogue will be able to shoulder the needs of Afghan communities across Afghanistan. That's our hope.
That's our hope as well. That's my hope as well. And let's keep a close watch on the situation. Thank you so much, Mr. Robert Mardini, Director General of the International Committee of the Red Cross, joining us from Geneva.